Hey everybody, Ray here, and today I'm going to showcase a detailed build guide for my health stacking Dark Pact Pathfinder. I think it's a perfect time for health stacking builds to shine due to all the changes. This build is combining different qualities and can clear basically all the content in the current game. As you can see on the screen, it is perfectly Uber viable, very tanky against one-shots, tank SLAMS from Ubers without flinching, and can be a really fast mapper with great AoE and speed. It also excels against buffed monsters in any league mechanics that you want to run. All of that without any really expensive items, and only two main uniques. The health mechanic were my main theme for the league, and I wasn't sure how well it will go, but overall this Dark Pact build by far exceeded all expectations by melting bosses while staying fast and tanky, so it feels pretty great in almost all situations. It also works in synergy with new Warlock Affliction Ascendancy, which should complement all health stacking builds, but with some updates will be playable in the further leagues as well, even if Warlock will be completely removed. Talking about pros and cons, I would like to highlight a few things. As pros we can get tankiness, great DPS with big AoE and maps, and nice single targeted bosses, together with bleed, poison, corrupted blood, freeze and shock immunities, which are amazing for general gameplay. The build is fast and pretty versatile, since you can always change 2 flasks, depending on your needs. It is also not very expensive and does not require crazy uniques even in the last versions. As cons, I can say that playstyle could be pretty unusual due to dissolution of the flash interaction. You also will need to stay pretty close while bossing for best DPS, which could be annoying at times, but should be compensated by tankiness in most cases. The build requires disengaging from time to time to recharge the health reserve as well, which should be kept in mind. It is also important to swap one gem at Uber bosses to reach best DPS possible. Let's look into the mechanics that make the build strong and what you will need to play it. So the main mechanic for the build is pretty much a combination of dissolution of the flesh and the rasping shield. It can look a little hard at the first glance, but after you will figure it out, it will be pretty simple. Overall, because of the dissolution of the flesh, you're not really receiving any damage from the monsters. When they are hitting you, they're only reserving your life instead of taking the proper damage. That way we can pretty much sacrifice our life to use a Dark Pact and still not die in the bad situations, because when monsters will hit us, even if we have like 0 health at the moment, they will just try to reserve our health overall. This combination pretty much works pretty good with such skills that can utilize using the health as a medium to do more damage. And even if you don't have health because you can spend all of that to cast, you still can be pretty tanky. The downside of that all is pretty much the way how you can remove the reservation. So to remove it, you need to stop taking damage for 2 seconds. That's pretty much a lot, and sometimes in the middle of the fight you will need to stop and just run out. That's pretty unusual, but it can provide a really great tankiness against one-shots, because almost nothing can take you down immediately. Yet you will still need to look at this reservation all the time, and if you feel like a reservation is kinda too much and monsters keep hitting you, you will need to run back. So this dissolution of the flesh mechanic combines perfectly with the Raspy's Glove. That kind of shield can give us critical strike chance for spells per 100 player maximum life, and increase spell damage per 100 player maximum life as well. That way we also will need to sacrifice 10% of our life when we trigger or use a spell. Please keep in mind that while you're using spell echo, you sacrifice life only when you use a skill itself. When it echoes through the spell echo mechanic, you're not sacrificing anything. That pretty much helps with mitigation. So Wrathfist together with Dissolution allows us to just stack health as a form of damage. It works pretty good in the most cases, and let us focus on our health for both survivability and damage itself. To make sure we are not really dropping too fast, and that we always have health to sacrifice with the Dark Pact, we are using Eternal Youth. Eternal Youth pretty much gives us a chance to apply our energy shield recharge to life. That way we can reach huge recharge, and our recharge can be as high as our life itself. That way, while we have a recharge, we'll try to stay at higher life. But please remember that sometimes we are receiving damage and it stops our recharge from applying. That's pretty much a changed interaction, and it happens when we are staying at the maximum life and we are receiving some, even if little, but damage. That way we can lose a recharge for 2 seconds and it will start again a little later. It's not really happening too often, yet sometimes it's still happening. Since we are not using crazy mechanics that spend our life too fast, such as sacrifice, it still should be pretty much alright. But since we are dropping to low life when we are hit and we are losing the recharge, I'm using a Pain Atonement to pretty much compensate for it. In the most cases, it's a pretty good bonus, especially since we should stay a little lower than half of the life most of the time. So talking more about how we can stack our life even further, we are using new Warlock Ascendancy, which is pretty much amazing for all health stacking builds. It mostly needed for Crimson Power, which removes all energy shield from our character and pretty much gives us a way to receive maximum life instead of maximum energy shield from equipped armor items. That way we can pretty much stack helmet, body armor, gloves and boots with as high energy shield as possible, receiving health instead, which helps us with DPS through the Rasping bonuses. We're also taking the Ravenous skill from the Warlock Ascendancy, which pretty much gives us a chance to consume the corpse and receive damage bonus and less damage taken from all monsters of the same type. Please remember that most Uber bosses are Eldritch, and you will need Eldritch corpses to use it against them. You can also use it in maps, even if I think it's not really that important, but you can click any random monsters with a Ravenous skill to receive bonuses. Except from Ravenous and Crimson Power, we don't really need anything else in the Warlock Ascendancy, and you can pretty much ignore the rest of the point or just take more Wild Beast bonuses. With all of those mechanics together, we can pretty much reach a really huge amount of health, at least 20,000, and going to like 22, 23, maybe even 25,000 of life, which works pretty good for most of the cases. It gives us tankiness, it helps with DPS, and pretty much makes our character stronger in all different ways. So talking about uniques for the build, Dissolution of the Flesh and Wrathfist Glob are pretty much build enabling. Both of them are not really expensive and you will need to get them to start playing the build properly. I also really like how Eyes of the Great Wolf are pretty much combined with the most of the build qualities, so I think it's a really good option. As a weapon, you can use the really buffed wand, but if you don't have it, I really prefer Divinarius, since Divinarius can help us a lot with receiving 100% critical strike chance while we are mapping, and receiving critical strike multiplier against bosses. It also has Area of Effect, which synergizes pretty well, and a lot of spell damage, which is pretty good for a build too. That's pretty much all the uniques that we will need, and there's not a lot of additional options. You can also use that which was taken Crimson Jewel to receive additional bonuses such as Frenzy Charge, On Hit, Culling Strikes, and stuff like that. But it's not completely necessary and should be just a cherry on top. On the helmet you don't need anything in particular, so you can aim for such Chaos Resistance, maximum life, energy shield recharge rate, and high energy shield itself. On the gloves we can pretty much get increased energy shield recharge rate as well, together with health, and if you will have an open prefix, I think increased attack and cast speed while focus could be a really good bonus, since you can use focus while you are fighting bosses, and it can help with single target damage significantly. For the boots, you will need to get increased movement speed, together with energy shield recharge rate, and life, that's pretty much it. And for the body armor, it would be perfect to avoid getting any life bonuses on it, since we're using the passive in the tree, which gives us 15% increased maximum life if there's no life modifiers on equipped body armor. It works pretty great and therefore we need to avoid getting any life modifiers on the body armor itself. So we just need to avoid for high energy shield, and chaos resistance itself would be nice as well. If you will have an open crafting modifier, you can pretty much craft increased attributes here to get more life through STR. Out of the jewelry, the most important items should be belt. It pretty much can give us increased flask charge gained, which works pretty good with all Pathfinder builds. That way, that bonus should be on both your basic build and your endgame version. Therefore, just try to get it on all the belts that you are using. If you can get increased maximum life percentage on it, or just maximum life together, it will be pretty nice. For the endgame belt, you can also add flask ups like you have increased effect, or cast speed during any flask effect, which both should be pretty great. So talking about the rings, you can pretty much focus on getting the basic version. With the basic version, you pretty much just need to have percent of increased maximum life, cast speed, and maximum life itself. If you will be able to get STR on top of that, that would be really nice. For the endgame ring, on the other hand, you can pretty much aim to get a little more bonuses, such as Global Critical Strike Multiplier and Chaos Resistance. Both of them should be really nice bonuses. You can also craft increased damage if you have an open prefix, which should help with overall damage, even if just a little. Talking about the amulet, in most of the cases I really prefer Eyes of the Great Wolf, which is unique, and I think even if you can get the perfect percentage, you can just get the lower one for pretty alright price. Talking about the jewels, in most cases I just aim for increased energy shield recharge rate, maximum life and critical strike multiplier for spell damage. If you really aim to get the maximum percentage of damage out of it, you can drop increased energy shield recharge rate in some cases and go for double critical strike multiplier, or even triple critical strike multiplier. Yet in most cases it's not really necessary. So talking about the Ascendancy, we are pretty much going the same way as most Pathfinder builds, and going for Nature's Adrenaline first, since it gives us chance to receive flask charges every time and keep our flasks up at all times as well. The second Ascendancy should be Nature's Reprisal, since it's the main way for us to inflict Wizard on all the enemies when we are hitting them with our spells. Since we have a pretty high cast speed, it's pretty easy to inflict enemies with maximum amount of Wizard. We're also getting increased effect of Wizard, which is pretty much great for DPS as well. The next Ascendancies should be Nature's Boon. For magic utility flasks applied to you have 30% increased effect, which synergizes well with all of our kit. It gives us more effective hit pool through the bonuses for like elemental flasks, it gives us more movement speed, cast speed and stuff like that. The last Ascendancy is the most strange one. You can go for Master Alchemist, however I don't really like it. And most of the time I just take Flask Effect and Charge Gain 1 and Flask Effect and Charge Gain 2. That's pretty much unusual, but I think it's more effective that way, and I really prefer it. So you can try both options with Master Alchemist and without, to tell which one will be an option for you. So talking about why choosing Pathfinder over all other Ascendancy options. I think Pathfinder right now is a perfect kit for Dark Pact, since Nature's Reprisal is probably the best way to apply Wizard fast. For most other options you will need to stay close to the enemy for a long period of time. With Nature's Reprisal you can just hit enemies with the spells and receive bonus from Wizard that way. Since we are casting a lot of spells and our cast rate can get to like 8 or even 9 casts per second, we can get maximum stacks of Wizard on almost any enemy pretty fast with Nature's Reprisal. Second bonus, it's Nature Adrenaline. I think with that bonus, we can just stack all the flasks in any way we want. We can get more fire resistance, we can get all the resistances from flasks, we can get less cold damage taken, less lightning damage taken, less fire damage taken and stuff like that. We can also get a lot of movement speed because of this, and pretty much run around really fast, together with onslaught bonuses, cast speed bonuses and stuff like this. I think flasks are pretty much really good for such build. especially since we can't stack resistances from items right now. Stacking them from flask is pretty much a really good idea, and it works pretty well. We're also receiving more bonuses from flasks itself due to nature's boon, and I think it makes the character overall stronger since that way we can be much tankier. We're not losing a lot except maybe area of effect, which could be good at other ascendancies, but I don't really think it's important in the most cases. We are doing much more damage than any other option, we are stacking wizard faster, we are receiving wizard bonuses, and we always have flasks. I think right now Pathfinder is definitely a best option due to all reasons like that. So talking about the tree, it's pretty simple. We're just going up and to the left while trying to take all the health node on the way. We are taking health there, 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 and there. So most of the time we're just trying to stack as much health as possible while going for Eternal Youth and Blood Magic right here. Both of them are pretty important for the build, so try to go to the left until you reach them. In the path of building I also prepared a few different trees, so make sure to check them. You can also click there to see my notes with frequently asked questions and list of tips that can pretty much help you to remember what is important for the build itself. You can also change the budgets in the item sets, in the skill sets, and in the tree sets. Make sure that you are changing all of them. I'm also supplying the path of building for both mapping and bossing. It's not really different, it's pretty much mostly the same, but you can check them both to better understand how they're different. So talking about the flask, since it's pretty much Pathfinder build, you will need to aim for increased charge recovery on reduced charge per use at every flask. That pretty much will help with the uptime, so try to get it for tier 1 if possible. So talking about flasks in particular, I'm using the Ruby flask for fire resistance, Topaz flask for lightning resistance, and Sapphire flask for cold resistance. Those three together are pretty much a really good way to get resistances up and to get more tankiness. At the Topaz flask I'm also using additional elemental resistances during effect, since it's a pretty strong bonus with which we can cap resistances without any issue and any resistances on the items. So try to get additional elemental resistances during effect at any of your flasks. As an utility flask, I'm pretty much using Silver Flask with critical strike chance bonus, since I think it's pretty good for a really good onslaught uptime. And I'm using Quicksilver Flask for movement speed bonus to run faster through maps. At bosses, I'm also using Sulfur Bottled Fate, which is pretty great. Even considering the build don't really need critical strike chance since we're already capped with it, we still need Consecrated Ground effect can apply increased damage taken to enemies, which are pretty much on Consecrated Ground. I think it's a good way to boost our single target when we are fighting strong bosses. So talking about our gem setup, it's pretty simple in the most cases. As the body armor we're just using the Dark Pact together with increased critical damage, Awaken Spell Echo or just Spell Echo Awaken Void Manipulation or just Void Manipulation, together with Intensify, because I think Intensify is a really great way to increase your damage. You're just casting, receiving Intensify bonuses, and your AoE falls down. But when you're starting to move, you'll lose Intensify and you'll pretty much get your AoE back. That way, when you encounter a strong enemy, you can just stop, cast, get Intensity together with a damage bonus, and kill the monsters, and you will start running, and you will get your AoE back. And the last bonus is Concentrated Effect, which should be changed based on what are you doing. I will cover it a little later in the video, but right now I could say that in the mapping, most of the time I'm using increased area of effect, since it helps build heavily with AoE. That way we can clear much easier. However, at Uber bosses, in the most cases, I've been using Concentrated Effect instead, because I really think it's a pretty good option. Talking about other gems, I'm using Shield Charge together with faster attack support to move around. And I'm using Frost Blink because it's instant and it could be used at some moments when you can't properly Shield Charge. I'm also using Assassin's Mark together with Arcanist Brand, Despair and Increased Duration support. Since I'm using Whispers of Doom and my amulet, we can use like two curses. First one is Assassin Mark and the second one is Despair. To make it much more convenient, Arcanist Brand is required. I also really prefer Increased Duration, but it's not mandatory and you can drop it if you want. At the boots, I'm using Zealotry together with Divine Blessing support. We can't properly have auras since they will pretty much get rid of our health and we don't really need that in the most cases, but we can use the Divine Blessing bonus with an aura. I also really like Increased Duration and Efficacy here for even more duration because I don't really like to click them constantly. So we're just using Zealotry in most cases, and every 21 seconds we need to reuse it. I think it's pretty much alright, you don't really need to use it more often while you are mapping, and most of the time I'm just using it pretty much on bosses. As the helmet, I'm using Lightning together with Precision. It's not really that mandatory, but it's additional critical strike chance, which should be pretty good. If you don't have Precision and you don't have even Corrupted and Lightning, feel free to drop it altogether, it will not change a lot about the build itself. And the last skill, I'm pretty much using Blight right here. I think Val Blight gives us about 7% of increased DPS, and you can still use it even in the Uber bosses from time to time. So I'm keeping it up in case I will want to click that. I'm using Immortal Call together with Increased Duration just to survive better, because I think it's a pretty good option. We're receiving less elemental and less physical damage taken together, which I think is pretty good. And I'm using Decoy Totem for some cases, when I just want monsters to stop hitting me to recharge my health. It's also not really that important. That's pretty much it in case of the gem setup. In most cases you will just need Arcanist Brand together with Curses, your Dark Pact, and Zealotry together with the Divine Blessing. Everything else is pretty much depends on what you prefer, and you can change gems in any ways that you want. So the difference between mapping and bossing setup is not that big. You only need to change the gem. For mapping we are using Awakened Increased Area of Effect, which pretty much helps with cover the screen with AoE and really good for clearing and stuff like that. When for the bossing we are using Concentrated Effect. That way we will need to stay close to the boss, but we will deal much more damage. The difference will be about 30 to 40%, depends on your build at the moment. So it's pretty important. For most Uber bosses I'm using Concentrated Effect, and for mapping I'm just using Awakened Increased Area of Effect. You also can change the flask, since for mapping Quicksilver is pretty much mandatory to run around pretty fast and to be a fast mapper overall, and for bosses, for most of the time I'm using Bottled Fate, since it can pretty much give you about 15% increased DPS, and I think it's pretty good. So you will just need to change the flask and the gem, and you're pretty much Uber ready. For lower bosses, I'm not changing anything since the damage is pretty much enough, even with Awakened Increased Area of Effect. So talking about our Pantheon, that's pretty simple. We are getting Soul of the Brine King just to get a 100% chance to avoid being frozen and reduced effect of chillness. That's pretty much a really nice free way to get freeze immunity, and I think it works pretty good. As a minor god, we are getting Soul of Aberrath, mostly to be unaffected by Burning Ground. And less duration of Ignite is a pretty much really nice cherry on top. We also can get Soul of Groot Cool as a second option. That way we'll receive less physical damage for each hit we've taken recently, up to a maximum of 5%, which is pretty good, and all enemies which are hitting us will get reduced attack speed bonus. In most cases, if there's no Ignite around, I think Soul of Groot Cool could be a pretty decent option. We shouldn't have any issues with Chaos, but if you have some, you can go for Soul of Shakari to pretty much get reduced Chaos damage taken bonus. We don't really need the first bonus since we are pretty much have 100% poison avoidance. For the build based on Dissolution Flash, it's pretty important to reach the immunities against different damage over time effects. Since if you will not reach the immunity, it will be pretty uncomfortable to play in some cases, especially when monsters spam a lot of damage over time effects. That way you can't go out of the fight and can't reset your health reservation. So how we are reaching immunities to most of the damage and effect? First, we will need to get Evasion Mastery right here for 30% chance to avoid bleeding and 30% chance to avoid poison. After we are getting it, we are going up there and getting Chaos Resistance and Avoidance, Poison Avoidance and Tolerance. So with it we are receiving 30% more chance to avoid poison and bleeding. We are also taking only Poison Avoidance right here, just because we will compensate chance to avoid bleeding from boots. So 36% we are receiving from boots, 20 we are receiving here, 30 here. Also 10 here and 30 here. That's pretty much enough to reach the immunities in most of the cases. If it's not, you can also roll at least one bonus on the jewel itself. Most of the time you will need the bonus chance to avoid being poisoned. So try to roll it on your murder side jewel or maybe on some of the jewels that you're using in the tree. It's pretty much common corruption. Just try to roll it if you can. We're also taking the protection mastery right here to make sure we are immune to corrupted blood in the most cases, since it's pretty important for build to feel good. To receive shock immunity, we are using Chemist's Sapphire Flask effect. We are receiving 63% reduced effect of shock, but since flasks that are used on our character getting bonus effects, those 63% are going up to 101. That way we are completely immune to shock. We are also getting freeze immunity from breaking, and Ignite should have much less duration because of the Soul of Aberrath. That way we are almost completely immune to all possible effects. So talking about charges and Culling Strike, we have two sources. For power charges, we are pretty much using the quality from Assassin's Mark. That gives us a chance to receive power charge when we are hitting enemies. It pretty much works alright on bosses. We're not receiving them completely consistently, but most of the times we should have them. For the Frenzy Charge and for Culling Strike, we are using that which was taken Crimson Jewel. At that Crimson Jewel, you pretty much need to just aim for chance to gain Frenzy Charge on hit together with Culling Strike. If you can get only one of them, I think Frenzy Charges should be better. But overall, both of them are pretty important for the build, so try to get both of them together. I will also showcase a full Maven fight as well, since a lot of mapping gameplay is already in the video and you can check it during the whole duration. Yet I want to showcase a little more bossing to just highlight how well build pretty much can deal with them. So that was my Dark Pact Pathfinder, which pretty much based on the health stack. I would say the build is really strong in most cases. It's tanky, fast, it can kill bosses, it can clear pretty much everything, and it's amazingly versatile. So doesn't matter what kind of content you want to do, it will be pretty much great at almost anything in the current game. Thank you very much for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Path of Exile content, and see you next time.